Welcome to the Propreneur Podcast, where we help practice owners become better entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Dino Watt. And welcome once again, everybody, to the Propreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Dino Watt, and excited for our episode today, where we're going to really dive into some amazing tools and tactics to taking your practice to the next level. My guest today is Genevieve Poppe, who is here, and she's going to share with us her years and years and years of experience. Actually, it can't be that long. It's like maybe 10 years because she's like, what, 25, 30 years old? Is that right?
Yeah, right.
Look, for those who are watching,
good Botox.
Listen, for those who are just listening, they have no idea. Like, go with it.
Yes, I'm super young.
We all are. Yeah, I just hit my 25-year wedding anniversary, and I'll be like 40, I think 8 next month. And I'm like, no, I feel 21 still. Like, especially looking at the pictures of my wife and I when we were first married, I'm like, I still feel like that kid.
It doesn't feel like that long.
I know, right? It's so fast. Well, I'm thrilled to have you on the show. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
And now you've just gotten a taste on how we kind of do it here on this podcast, where it's just pretty loosey-goosey, but we're going to get some great information. So thanks for playing.
Perfect.
Well, I am a big fan of not like being the person to introduce someone else, especially when they're sitting there. I always felt it awkward, right? I've been on a lot of podcasts, interviewed a lot of stuff where it's like, okay, I'll sit here and let you and listen to you talk about me. That sounds great. Yeah. So I'm going to let you have those honors and brag on yourself.
I have many times had to gone back and edit my bio after hearing somebody read it because I feel like it's weird.
I've done the same thing. I'm just like, oh, I need to change that. No, what's worse, I don't know if your spouse does this, but my wife will often be like, oh, we got to change that. Yeah. Oh, we got to move. I'm like, what's wrong with that? It sounds fine.
So yes, I am Genevieve Poppe. I have been in dentistry, believe it or not, for over 20 years. And I've done a little bit of everything in the industry. I started my career actually because I was a naughty kid in high school, and my guidance counselor got me a job at Dr. Smith's office, so I wouldn't skip school anymore.
Nice.
I literally used to do the handwritten postcards at Dr. Smith's office when I was 15.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've been a dental assistant. I've been a treatment coordinator, a practice manager, and I ultimately went on to own and manage 7 dental practices here in Wisconsin. So I have a pretty broad and like really practical operational background and very real, direct patient experience. And I think that's maybe a little unique about me, that I've sat in sort of all these different positions and gives me a little advantage in perspective.
Well, I'm really fascinated by your ownership. Like, you've owned practices and managed them. So I've been actually talking about this quite a bit lately, about people who maybe are not specifically dentists or orthodontists or chiropractors, but they own those businesses. And there's a lot that goes into that, right? Because you got to find the people that will help you grow that practice and help you actually manage it when you're not there.
Right.
It's a lot of trust and a lot of faith in that. Talk to us a little bit about that. I'm very interested in that, about how you decided, hey, I can own a practice.
Well, probably like the initial idea for me came from feeling like I was limited by my own doctor. When I was this manager, I felt like I could do this better. I could make this practice bigger, but was limited by maybe how he viewed what is possible for a dental practice. And ultimately, I felt so stuck in that role that I moved on from a practice that I'd been with for a long time and had really grown and really loved. And weirdly enough, the universe puts things in our path. I landed a job as an office manager in a private equity company. And I learned more about, private equity funds and, private equity investing, and met my then partner. He was my boss, and we launched this idea to acquire practices and transition them and sort of preserve a private practice experience and an ownership path for young dentists. And he knew how to structure it. He was an MBA finance guy, and I knew operationally sort of what could make them sing. And so we literally launched the idea over a burrito at Chipotle.
Wow.
Did it.
Wow.
Yeah, we raised money and acquired practices from retiring dentists and set up an ownership earnout sort of affiliate model for our dentists. And it was really one of the coolest, best things I've ever done. I just did it with a person who wasn't the best partner for me. We didn't click like we
Sure.
did. And when that fell apart for me and I had to sort of make the choice to move on, I just decided I would help other people build their empire, whatever that looks like for them.
Well, what a unique perspective, right? That you could, you go into practices now, help doctors grow their practice, take it to the next level, to do, prepare for selling it. Well, eventually everybody's going to have an exit somehow, right? Either going to, unfortunately, nature is going to take you back, or you're going to choose to, sell it to someone else. But you now have the perspective of, oh, let me tell you, as someone who used to buy these practices, what I would look for and how I would value them beyond just, yeah, we're making money.
Correct. Yeah, I think I look at it a lot of ways. And, I feel like I have great perspective about the different ways you can grow a practice or create value in a practice, and what ultimately sticks and what doesn't when a doctor leaves or exits.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that every person I'm working with is on the brink of selling their practice or looking at that valuation, or necessarily looking to grow like a multiple location group or anything. But certainly the experience of managing that many people and growing something to that size and, maintaining the balance between autonomy and accountability and those types of things were huge learning lessons for me. And I think give me a lot of personal exposure to draw from as I help people in their own situation.
Okay. I have so many sneaking questions for you then, because and what I do, so my whole focus is helping doctors, practice owners learn how to be entrepreneurs. Only 3% of society has the entrepreneurial DNA. You take that to professionals like doctors. I actually just did a test. I was speaking at an event this last weekend, and at the beginning I was emceeing the whole thing. At the beginning of the speech, I had everybody stand up if they had a certain qualities and traits.
Right.
And at the end of saying those, only about 50% of the people in the room, which was a group of people who were focused on being entrepreneurs or understanding they need to be entrepreneurs, growing their practice, were standing up. And those traits were the traits of what it really means to be an entrepreneur. And I think it's important. I would assume that you came across this quite a bit, where you would run into people who went through what I call the natural progression of let's just call them a dentist, right? They go to dental school, they get all the great grades, they graduate, they become an associate somewhere, and then they think, I should go and buy a practice. Yeah. Either I'm going to buy the practice I'm associating in, or I'm going to buy something else, so I can have, eventually, I'll work 20, 30 years to get that golden parachute. And that 20, 30 years, that's all about being an entrepreneur. It's not about what you do.
Right.
So how did you deal with that when you would run into people that you were like, oh, these guys are not entrepreneurs?
Yeah. Well, sometimes poorly.
You dealt with it poorly.
Sometimes not that well. I think I had the benefit of learning a lot of hard lessons in that time in my life.
I bet.
I mean, truly, I now laugh about it when I say it, but truly when I built this model, what I thought was, I can shorten the learning curve for these guys. I can take them from point A to point B so much faster than they'll ever get there on their own. And I can show them all the systems to do it. I can coach them up on the verbal and communication skills to do it. And then they'll just do it and they'll say thank you.
Oh, that's cute. That's really,
darling.
That's really sweet of you.
I was so optimistic.
But here's the deal. For people like you and me, it's like, well, yeah, that's what you do. I mean, I'm a born entrepreneur, and you're like, okay, somebody show me what to do and I'll do it.
Yes. I really thought that for most people, their barrier to great success was finding the right opportunity. And really, it has nothing to do with that. They're their own barrier to success. And many people in our industry are not natural entrepreneurs. If you do the 16 personalities quiz, I am an entrepreneur. That's my personality type. So I can relate to what you're saying very much. And why you can be crazy enough to think that you can just launch something like that with that idea. That's, somebody basically crazy enough to be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
What I've found, that I think has been really helpful to the practices that I work with. One, I mean, I can share my experiences, but two, I've started implementing EOS, or the Entrepreneurial Operating System, with people. And, I can't make a born entrepreneur out of them, but I can give them tools and some repeatable systems and, I guess, a way to think about their business that can help them be more successful than thinking about it like a dentist or a physician. I work with people sometimes outside of dentistry, but in nearly every case that, this system applies, it's somebody who was good at a trade or a skill and then opened a business around it. And frankly, they're not necessarily gifted at any of the other stuff that goes around it. Like when you talk about culture and vision and values, I think the thing that I'm able to add to that with EOS is what they would call traction, like the ability to make some of that stuff stick and to build in some accountability around it. Because I always joke that the dental office is the only job in the world where your boss can ask you to do the same thing 20 times and you can just not do it and keep your job. And like in any other industry,
totally,
you don't get asked for the 20th time.
Yeah, totally.
But that is like totally every day in every dental office.
And you're not even talking, like, for those of you that are listening, she's not even just talking, and many of you listening know this, about like something technical to do 20 times. It's like, can you be here on time tomorrow? Would that be?
Please, could you come on time? Come to the huddle.
So I often tell people I never go into a practice, and when I do my assessment and I'm there for the day, I never go back to the doctor and say, oh, you got to fire this person. That's not my job. My job is to find out and ask questions of the doctor of why. And one of the most recurring questions that I ask is, why are you okay with this insubordination happening in your practice? And people take the insubordination word as like such a big deal. It's like, oh, that's really rough. Like, are they being insubordinate? Well, you asked.
I don't know if it's insubordination.
Right. And I'm like, well, you asked them to do something specifically and they're not doing, I don't know. What do you call it? And it's very interesting. You're exactly right. It is an industry that is rampant. I literally was just on a phone call before us where we were talking about this scenario. And he's like, I got to let her go. I mean, how many times do I have to say it? I'm like, yeah, you should have done it 3 and been done.
Right.
So
I'm with you. I think it's, I think a lot of it in healthcare anyway, is that the people sort of drawn to those roles are high empathy, conflict averse, more introverted personality types, right? And that makes them good at their craft.
Yep.
Challenges them dramatically in their ability to get results out of other people.
Yeah, I often will say, here's a group of people for the most part who are really good about figuring stuff out. They went through their whole life figuring out school, figuring out what they needed to do to get the right grades, figuring out how to pass the boards, all that. They figured it out. And then they get into actual life with other human beings who don't think the way they do, who aren't focused on things the way that they are. I feel like, is there an alarm going off somewhere? That they actually then now look at another human being like, I can't figure you out. How come I can't figure you out? How come I can't figure out the communication between us? Or as you mentioned, the culture and the vision, stuff like that. It really is interesting in this arena of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I think most of them have a vision. They have an idea of what they want, and some of them even like beautifully frame it in their waiting room. Right.
It's in a really pretty frame. That's
I don't do that to kid. I'm just like, they had this idea and then they share it. And just like you're saying, they expect that people are going to say, oh, okay. Oh, awesome. Okay, good. That's what we're doing. And then they'll do it. Just like I thought that would happen for my, my organization. And then when they get to that point, they're like, now what? They don't know what to do. They don't really want to pick a fight. They don't want their hygienist to be mad at them tomorrow. Things like simple. And so then they just, honestly, they kind of abandon their conviction in a lot of cases.
Great way to say that.
And it's sad because then they're unhappy. They bought this practice. Sometimes they're the last one getting paid out of it.
Yep.
You know, meanwhile, they have a team of people that they just can't ask to do the basic stuff because they never held them accountable to one thing ever.
And to add the sad onto that, they don't talk about it.
Mm-mm.
They totally keep it inside. They don't, who do they go to, right? When it's, they're not going to go tell their spouse that they got payroll to do in 2 days and they don't have the cash flow to do it, or that they're mortgaged up to the hilt, or go to a team member. Like, who do they go to? And even other doctors, there's this sense of like, well, I don't want to be vulnerable and tell them that I'm vulnerable. So let me ask you this. You know this stuff. You have this incredible amount of information and experience to share. How have you turned that into your current business? And what are you doing for these doctors to actually overcome all that?
Sure. So I work with people kind of on two sides of this, probably the same problem. One is sort of their organizational development through the EOS implementation, which again is that entrepreneurial operating system. That to me is how I've sort of stopped as a consultant being a firefighter for them and helped them put in a system, helps them over time be able to solve their own problems and access back to the learning. And when I first started consulting, I was just a great resource and I was always there to be helpful to people, but I didn't feel like I was really fixing anything fundamentally. You know, I would help them through tough decisions. I would chat them off the ledge if they were having a tough moment with a team member, things like that. But for me, EOS sort of stopped that cycle.
And is EOS
a really a big game changer?
Sorry, you paused there. I want to make sure people heard that you cut out a little bit there.
Okay.
So when they're changing the cycle, you were talking about how it changes the cycle of how they show up.
Yeah. So for me, it broke the cycle of me just being a resource to them and sort of being reliant on me to fix their problems. And it gives them a way to manage their own problems over time. You know, I'm a consultant that's happy to graduate people. You know, like I don't want them to need me forever.
Yep.
That's my biggest success. I feel good about doing that. So that's been a really fun thing to bring to offices. I've been doing that a couple years now. I also work with them kind of on the other side of the same thing, which is communicating with patients. So I actually do a lot of, for all this background that I have, I actually do a lot of phone skills training. And teaching people the basics of new patient phone conversion and treatment plan presentation, and, you know, getting that buy-in and connection to patients as well. So I kind of have these two pillars, and sometimes I'll start with one and go to the other and vice versa. But yeah, I find that, you know, weirdly, every practice that I talk to wants their practice to be bigger. And then I take a quick look at their first line in, which is their phone. And they tend to have the wrong person sitting in that seat, or a person who's received literally no training or qualification to be in that seat. They're often the cheapest
100%.
person they can afford. And their phone conversion percentage is atrocious by any other sales metric, you know, standpoint. And frankly, they just have a really negative viewpoint about the way that patients are coming to us. You know, if you go on Facebook any day of the week, you will find front desk people, however they identify, complaining about the very patients that are calling them.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
And so, you know, I think I can teach them what to say, but I think I also equally as important have to teach them how to think.
Yeah.
So I spend a fair amount of time with people on that first line, because I really think it's a blind spot in almost in practice growth.
Yeah, I call that person the director of first impressions, because they definitely are, right? It's like the first impression of your practice is that person. So why would you not have the best phone ninja you can possibly have? Somebody who not only can ask the questions you want them to ask, but can listen and actually hear what the person's saying, not just fill in the blank that is the paper in front of them.
Amen.
So true.
Yeah. I see that a lot of offices trying to find the cheapest person they can put in that seat. They view it as an entry-level, lowest on the totem pole position. I think that's crazy. I would take your best person. and
You're right.
raised to do that. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, like, I think it's totally backwards. Or I see people that are like, their best qualifications for that role is that they know a lot about insurance and they're good at dentrics.
Right.
You know,
Well,
and
well,
that's valuable, but that's not who you want in that seat.
No, absolutely. It's the same type. And so in the orthodontic world, I use this comparison with the TCs all the time. Most often your TC, the treatment coordinator, who is responsible for bringing the money into your practice, right? With money is the heir of every business.
Yes.
And that this is the person who typically started probably at the front desk and then maybe went to do some records and then, oh, we know what, I like people. I'm good with people. So let's move them up. They just moved through the evolution of the practice up to that spot, but they have no actual training for it or actual passion, desire, skills. They can get the training. The training and the skills are two different things. So yeah.
Yeah, they might be trained, but a lot of times they're not. Like if you thought of that as a sales seat, which we don't like to say, but if you did.
It is.
That's what it is.
It totally is.
You probably wouldn't hire the person that you once hired because they're good at insurance.
Right.
You know, those are not the same personality profiles.
I often say, look, if you are a true business owner, you understand the idea that the more money coming into my practice, the more I can grow, the more I can serve, the more I can give, right? Well, then if you're thinking about that person, whether it be your hygienist, you want them to be really good at sales. You want them to understand the psychology of sales. You want them to understand that because all sales is the transference of excitement and enthusiasm from me to you about the product that I'm presenting.
Yes.
And if you can do that, then you're going to win the game. But if you're just putting the person who's really good with people, so what? There's a lot of people that are really good with people.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't get in knife fights. That's cool. Like, what do you mean? So it's interesting to me. So then what I'd like to know, and I'm sure what our listeners would like to know is, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see happening inside of these practices right now, especially with the evolution of orthodontics, dentistry, private practice ownership, with all the direct consumer stuff going on, with the DSOs, which you have so much experience with? What's the biggest challenge you see? And then do you have any like real world results or stories you can tell us? We love stories.
Okay. I would say, honestly, the biggest challenge that I see kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, which is just a true discomfort with the idea of management and accountability in these practices. And that rears its head in a lot of ways, but what it really ultimately comes back to is like, nobody's in charge. There is no boss. Nobody's comfortable with that. Many offices I talk to won't even have an office manager because they hate the word office manager. And, you know, they have this, 20-year-old negative association with the idea of what that is. And it hurts them because also nobody's tasked with making sure this thing's performing. Yeah. And it comes down to team performance. It comes down to actual effectiveness. There's a real, God forbid you want to talk about numbers, then you're numbers driven. And there's a real negativity around reviewing our actual results, And so just that letting a practice get 10 years in without ever having had any sense of management, it will stall. It can only get so far, and they get really stuck. And then what happens is implementing something as simple as like, you're now going to be accountable, or you're now going to be a little bit responsible, or, hey, if you're the person who does recare and recare sucks, you're in trouble, not in trouble, but we're going to look to you and say, what's going on, right? That's
part of your job performance.
Yeah. That becomes this big, tidal wave change for them. And a lot of times they're just not comfortable weathering what that takes to implement the type of change that they need to change to get to the next level.
You're right. And unfortunately, I think I see when they become uncomfortable with that, then they do the fallback position of like, well, I'm just not going to worry about it, or I'll do it myself. Or I'll just, I'm not going to take the time. I often say, look, if you spend just a few hours and even some days training somebody to do the thing that you should not be doing, you're going to save yourself years of pain and frustration. But they don't. They do the fallback, the default, like, well, I'll just do it myself. And you're right, the burnout comes. Can I ask so when you talk about the entrepreneur operating system, by the way, is that your program?
That is not my program. I did not invent it.
It's just one that you use.
Yeah. So
okay.
It's
But that seems like so a lot of these guys need systems. When you're coming up to them and being like, hey, you're not knowing how to do this, let me give you a system to plug in. It seems like that's a pretty powerful thing for you.
It works really well for me because it basically addresses sort of the key components of their business, and it gives them a structure to measure their results, to learn to be proactive from numbers, building in the mentality that we can course correct, that we don't have to find out on the 11th of November that October sucked.
What? That never happens. What are you talking about?
Habit, right? Like we look at last month's numbers a week and a half in,
right?
And now we're a week and a half into this month, and this one isn't going much better, and there's just no sense of, what, maybe preparing for this Halloween day at school is not as important as us spending 3 hours following up an unscheduled treatment. Sometimes we have to just shift what we're working on, and we can't do that if we're not reviewing our actual results. We have to look at what's happening. So building that thinking into a practice, through some systemization around those things, I found has been very helpful. I won't say it's not without pains. I joke that I'm an enthusiastic change agent, and not everybody loves that about me.
Right.
I'm comfortable pushing through that discomfort because I know what's on the other side of it.
Right.
And when I can get people through it, there's times where I try, and like you say, that we hit the wall, we go to default, and they're convinced they can't do this. But they can if they really want to, and they're willing to do what it takes. And if that's letting somebody who's been there for 15 years and you've created a monster out of them, which is kind of what happens. They're like spoiled children,
Yeah, they believe they have tenure.
Yeah, and you call in super nanny, and I'm going to put them in timeout 7 times. We have to do that. And sometimes they come around and sometimes they shake out. And it's not that that's my goal, but they have to be willing to have that much conviction to get to the other side.
Well, I love that you mentioned twice now the importance of looking at the numbers and seeing, hey, is this the highest and best use of our time as a business owner? Like you said, right now. Oh, so let's make sure, there's nothing wrong with doing the preparation for the Halloween party. Or one of my biggest pet peeves is the lack of effectiveness that as a business owner that patient appreciation parties give. I'm telling you, as someone who is, I think, look, you've got to have leads coming in. You're going to spend thousands of dollars on opening up a water park or going to a movie, and you're not going to look at that as how are we going to use this as a marketing tool, not just thank you for being our patient moment. It drives me nuts. Don't even get me started.
I agree. We could do a whole different episode on
that. We so good. I just like the first time I ever heard that, I was like, so what'd you get out of that? You spent $5,000 on this pool party thing. And it's like, well, we hope to get a patient or two out of it. I was like, hope? What business plan is hope? That's not, what are you talking about? What did you do to collect active leads to say, hey, I'm going to let you go swimming at this thing. You're going to bring your little friend, little Tommy, little Jane, whatever. And we're going to get that information so we can follow up with them. Yeah.
I totally agree with you. We don't have a lot of marketing sophistication.
No.
In our, it's sort of, it is pure gut. My favorite is when doctors say to me, oh, I wouldn't think so.
It's
they're back to a suggestion. Oh, I wouldn't think so.
Right.
Oh, well, you wouldn't think so. Well, fantastic.
Well, then I guess we won't do it. I guess all the marketing numbers, the studies, the research, that's wrong. But
if you wouldn't think so, let's just let it go.
Well, I always say I talk to my doctors all the time, and I'll say, here's the things I want you to do. Listen, the only thing that will screw this up is your better idea. and they're like, really? That. I'm like, yeah, it totally will. Don't have your better idea. Don't go there.
Yeah, just do this. Yeah, I'm with you.
We could go off. All right. So I want to definitely get a quick story. Do you have a quick story of some success of somebody that you were helping out?
Oh my gosh. to me, my favorite stories are honestly the little wins, right?
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, absolutely.
I sometimes feel more proud of a practice that finally broke through to profitability, or, you know, the doctor paid off their loan, or those things.
Love it.
Are way more significant to me than,
yeah,
you know, we made a $7 million a year kind of thing.
100%.
I feel the most impact when, you know, I recently had a doctor who has now paid off all of his credit card debt and paid off his practice loan.
What freedom.
And he's like a different person, you know, and he's better for his patients, and he's better for his team.
Yes.
And he had to do some hard stuff to get there.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have like a $2 million practice, you know, but he has a practice that's profitable, and he's making what he wants to make out of it. And he doesn't have the weight of the debt that was eating him up, and he feels smarter about making decisions. And, you know, that's
the bandwidth that has opened up in his brain, the peace and sleep that he's getting every night, not being chained down to that debt. That's a huge win. That's huge. That's awesome. I know there are doctors listening to this right now be like, yeah, what would that be like? Or that'll never happen. But it can with the right systems and discipline. And
it can. And it honestly didn't take that long. The beautiful thing about a dental practice is that so much of it is fixed cost. And you only have to do a little bit more to take home a lot more. You know, so it doesn't have to be you don't have to double the size of your practice. You know, you can make a huge difference in cash flow with a few smart moves. And I think when I see them getting, you know, overwhelmed, it's helping people understand an incremental difference in a couple of key areas. Yeah. Makes all the difference in the world in your cash flow.
Isn't that the truth in almost everything in our life, right? Darren Hardy has that book, The Compound Effect, right? Where it's just little tiny changes over a long period of time. Our problem is, as human beings, is we typically overestimate what we can do in a short period of time and underestimate what we can do over a long period of time. And we all do this. Look, I do the same thing. Like, all right, I'll do, you know, 30 sit-ups a day, and, you know, over 5 years, okay, finally I'll have the six pack abs that I want, but I want them now, you know? Right. And so, yeah, it's challenging. Man, we could talk forever. All right. So now we're at a place in the show, we like to go through our rapid fire questions just to kind of get to know you a little bit better, but just kind of quick answers to some fun questions. You ready to play?
Okay, I'm ready.
Awesome. All right, Genevieve, so what's the most expensive thing that private practice owners are missing in their business right now?
I would tell you it's not being aware of their new patient conversion percentage.
Huge.
Not understanding their effectiveness in that.
Got to know those numbers.
Yeah.
I get doctors, I can't go off on this, but seriously, like, oh no, we're getting about 50, 60% conversion. Like, you're okay with that? Like, anybody, like, so you don't have anybody at the front desk, or you don't have anybody like anybody can do this.
Yes.
All right. I'll take a breath. All right. So what's a book that you, and it could be a book or audio book, that every private practice owner you believe should read?
I'm going to say Traction by Gino Wickman, which outlines EOS.
Nice. Okay. Cool. I want to, I'll definitely, Traction. We'll put that in the show notes for sure. Traction by Gino.
Yep. By Gino Wickman.
Well, I like the name, so it's close enough. All right. In my book, The Practice RX, I focus a lot on team culture. That's what we talked a lot about here today. And team performance is a foundation for business growth. What do you feel when you go to these practices and you look around at the culture and what do you think is the biggest challenges that they're facing when it comes to their teams and their culture?
I feel like a broken record, but I'm going to say that ability to make it stick, that lack of accountability, is what they can have great ideas. They can have one-off good team meetings where they share this vision and like we talk about what we want our culture to be, but like the actual doing of it is lost very often.
And here's the thing. I believe that what you just said, people sometimes think about that as, oh, you just want us to be on them, right? The third part of my culture equation is support. And it is about supporting, understanding how they feel supported, but it's also in supporting them to be awesome. And they can't be awesome. They can't deliver what you want unless you have that trackability. In my marriage, I support my wife and what she does, by trying to help her do whatever she wants to do, be awesome in this way, that way. She does the same thing. We do this because we love them, not because we're trying to be disciplinarians.
That is a great clarification to how to accomplish that. It isn't about becoming a micromanager or, somebody who's riding people. It's just about walking the talk and staying consistent and being brave in their conviction about this thing they said they wanted.
And you want them to succeed.
So bad.
You so want them to succeed. So first of all, before we get to the last couple of questions, how can people reach out to you? Because I think that just your library of information and knowledge alone is key, let alone what you do as a business. So how can people reach out to you?
Sure. Probably the easiest way is to go to my website, which is Poppe, Poppe, practicemanagement.com. There's a link there to schedule a call with me or shoot me an email.
So do you ever get people asking if you do any type of opioid stuff because of the puppies?
Well, given that most people mispronounce it and say Poppe.
That's true, like me.
Right? A lot of people aren't making the correlation.
You know what's funny is that the first thing I put the correlation is that whole scene in The Wizard of Oz. Right? Going to the puppies. That was puppies. Puppies. That's what's in my head.
Yep.
All right. What's the best advice that you've ever received in business or life?
I once had a coach tell me, and in a moment of my own extreme frustration, when I was struggling as a manager, that I had to get comfortable with repetition or I would fail. And I heard that news crying at a picnic table. In a tough moment as a manager.
So it's really stuck there in your brain.
It's always stuck because I think a lot of people who reach sort of management or owner level, they're people who didn't have to be told more than once.
Yeah.
And they do this thing where I told them, or I shouldn't have to tell them that. And they get very frustrated with the idea of having to repeat themselves. And I think if you view it the way you're saying, which I love, is supporting somebody to be successful, you have to be comfortable in repetition and that you're going to have to clarify what you mean and you're going to have to give an example. And I actually had to learn I actually trained myself to respond to it differently, which has changed the way I felt about doing it entirely, which is when I had to talk about doing something different and then I didn't see that happening, I would say to myself, oh, good, here's an opportunity to clarify. And in making that shift from that advice, I think I've eliminated the idea of that feeling like conflict. And it does feel like an opportunity for me to support somebody being successful. And that I honestly was one of the biggest game changers for me ever.
I in my mind's eye, when you said that, I can see your approach of almost looking at it going, okay, here's this person here. I want him to get to this place. I did it this way. All right, now I got to go another route. Okay, now I got to do another route. There's different routes to the same result you want, but you just have to know how to approach that to them. That's awesome.
It changed a lot for me because my reaction initially was to assume that they were either willfully disobeying me or that they're too stupid to get this, or all the places we go when we're frustrated as managers and leaders. Yeah. And just being able to shift how I felt about that was fundamental.
I had a doc once call me up, and after all of her complaining, she just said, I just don't understand. I just want them to think like me. And I said, oh, well, you know why they're not is because they're not orthodontist. It's just, they're not going to do that. They just don't do that. So you got to come to them. They're not going to come to you.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. When it comes to tools or resources, you've mentioned the EOS a couple of times. That's obviously a really important tool. Are there other tools or something else that you actually think that every practice owner should be using in their practice?
I think another tool that every practice owner should have is phone recording. I think your new patient phone calls especially have got to be recorded. You've got to have game tape on these people if you want to teach them how to do it.
Okay. I love that you said that. Because it's not just recording. So I look at it as, yes, I want to know what they're saying. I record everything I do. I record this. I record all my coaching calls. I record almost all of my speeches because I want to go back and hear myself.
Yes.
It's the best teacher when I go, oh, why did I say it like that? Or she asked a question and I didn't even answer the question the way that she asked. Like,
yes,
it's such an important tool. And people think, oh, I don't want to think I'm checking up on them or whatever, but you're exactly right. Recording. I'm honestly on a campaign right now. I just got done writing my third book. And in that book, the end of it, I talk about the importance of recording everything you do so that you can learn faster. So I love that you said that.
Yeah. To me, I can't teach people to do it better without letting them hear what's actually happening. You know, I can give them great ideas, but I can't help them apply it unless I have a real situation. I don't like to do the shopper calls. I don't think those are real.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn a lot more when you hear yourself actually blow it.
Yep. and we as human beings tend to be like, no, we misremember.
Yeah.
So when you say, hey, so when you said this, you should do that. How often have you gotten so this might be another way to approach it. Like, oh, I do that. Well, you don't.
No, you don't. It's just like if you have a child who's an athlete, right? If you have a kid who's an athlete.
Right.
And they're, batting coach is filming them and they're saying, stop dropping your elbow, stop dropping and the kid will swear to you, I'm not doing it, and then you play back their tape. You're like, well, actually every single time you're doing it,
that's funny.
View ourselves through a different filter. You have to, high performance people do that exact habit. I mean,
who was it? Someone just said this recently, which is so true. What was I listening to? So we judge people on their actions, but we judge ourselves on our intention.
Yes.
And so we often will be like, well, no, I mean, even though I said I meant it like this.
Right.
It's like, well, but that doesn't matter what you meant. They're hearing that. So, yeah. Anyways, again, we could go off on a lot of topics on this. So. I love it. I love
our next one.
That's right.
Yeah.
Part 2.
Okay.
I have had a lot of part 2s lately. It's so funny because I know that my team just rolls their eyes at me when I'm, no, we should really keep it like a half an hour podcast. And they just look at me like, mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I'm not helping you with that.
I'm terrible. It's like, But I just enjoy talking to people who are passionate about what they do. And obviously you can tell that you are. I enjoy knowing that someone is going to listen to this. And I don't shoot for that. I got to have 100,000 listeners and all this stuff. I shoot for the one person that might stumble upon this podcast, that might have heard from a friend, that heard you say, all right, the number one thing you got to do is you just got to record those incoming calls, because then they're going to go, oh, I never thought about that. Or they're going to think, yeah, you know what? I got to have more discipline when it comes to that repetition and be okay with that. Or I got to hit those numbers. That's what it's about to me. So I appreciate so much your wisdom and your ability to just share with people what you see can help them improve their practice.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. I love doing that.
Well, you're great at it. And we will do a number 2 for sure. We'll make sure that happens. So everybody listening, please reach out to go to, is it Poppe.com? It's not Poppe.com.
Poppe Practice Management.
Poppe Practice Management. Sorry, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Poppe.com. You would get the drug people coming that one.
Don't go there.
Yeah, Poppe, don't go to that. PoppePracticeManagement.com. Genevieve, Poppe, thank you so much for your time and being willing to share with us all this great information. I hope you had a good time. I definitely did, and I hope our listeners did too.
Absolutely.
Awesome. We'll see everybody here at the Propreneur Podcast next time. Tune in for another amazing guest just like we had today. Thank you, everybody. See you then. Thanks so much again for listening to the Propreneur Podcast. We really appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed already, please make sure you do so. Also, if you feel like you might be a good fit for our podcast as a guest or know somebody who you think would be, go ahead and email us at dino@dinowatt.com. Again, thanks for support. We'll see you on the next episode.